Cupertino TV Productions is pleased to present a discussion of the November 2014 ballot propositions by the Cupertino-Sunnyvale chapter of the League of Women Voters.
Welcome to the better part. Cupertino Senior Television and the League of Women Voters have been working together for quite a few years now to bring you election information, and we're delighted to continue the partnership in 2014. I'm Susan Hough, Vice President for Voter Education of the League of Women Voters of Cupertino-Sunnyvale, and I'm here with League member Elanie Manley to bring you information about the upcoming election on November 4th. We'll primarily be talking about the statewide ballot measures, although we'll discuss election logistics as well, and try to offer you a few hints on how to make the most of this opportunity to have your say. Let's start with the election calendar. When is the deadline for registering to vote in this election?
Well, to vote on Tuesday, November 4th, you must be registered by Monday, October 20th. The registration deadline is always 15 days before an election, and you need to re-register if you've moved or if you want to change your party preference. You can find registration forms at any post office or DMV, at your library, or from your local League of Women Voters. The fastest way, though, is to go straight to the Secretary of State's website at sos.ca.gov and fill out the form online. If there's a signature on file with the DMV, you won't even need to print out the form and sign it. But if you do need to print it, just complete the form and mail it in or bring it to the Registrar of Voters' office. Over half of Californians are voting by mail these days, filling out their ballots at a time that's convenient to themselves. Santa Clara County has about 800,000 registered voters, and over 500,000 of them have requested permanent vote-by-mail status. If you are not a permanent vote-by-mail voter, you have until October 28th to request a vote-by-mail ballot. But I wouldn't wait that long. Your ballot must be received by the Registrar of Voters by the time the polls close at 8 p.m. on Election Day. So you should probably mail your ballot several days in advance, say by the Friday before the election. However, you can also drop off your ballot at any polling place in your county on Election Day. Voting places are required to be accessible, and if they aren't, an election worker will come out to the car to help you. Remember that if you ask one of your family members to drop off your ballot for you, you do need to sign the declaration on the vote-by-mail ballot, designating that person to deliver your ballot.
Okay, that takes care of the logistics of voting. What else do people need to know?
Well, I think people might like to know who we are and what we're trying to accomplish today. So who are we? The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 by some of the people working for women's suffrage, with the aim of making sure that when women did get the vote, they would exercise it thoughtfully and responsibly. Thoughtful, responsible voters are still our aim, though we've made a few changes over the years. For one thing, the League of Women Voters does accept men despite the name. We keep the name because we're proud of it and our history, but men have been able to be full members for many years. Our local league even has had a man as the president of our league. It's also an unfounded rumor that you have to have gray hair to join. You can join as soon as you turn 18 or gain your citizenship, and we're happy to have you as an associate member even before that. The league always benefits by having more voices, and we welcome yours. At the end of this program, we'll show you how to contact your local league. The League of Women Voters is also really two organizations. It's a nationwide member organization and an education fund. Neither organization ever supports or opposes political parties or candidates, but the member organization does take positions on public policy issues. Members vote to study an issue, they collect all the information, they discuss it over several months, and they come to a consensus position. That way, when new laws are proposed, the League can compare those proposed laws with positions already established by the members and then decide to support or oppose or remain neutral on them. The member organization routinely expresses opinions on ballot measures and occasionally signs ballot arguments for or against a measure. Although Susan and I are League members, we are not here to advocate on behalf of the League of Women Voters. Instead, we are here as a service of the League of Women Voters Education Fund to give an unbiased explanation of the propositions, including the pros and the cons of each, and the differences it will make to you. We'll also let you know who has come out for and against the propositions, but since we taped the show very early in the election season, we're not going to know everyone who will support or oppose. So mostly we'll be telling you who has signed the arguments for and against a measure. Unfortunately, that doesn't tell the whole story, and the financial picture changes steadily throughout the election cycle. At the end of this show, we'll give you some websites for updated financial information, as well as all sorts of other election-related information. Now, on to the election. What's new this time around?
We have 6 propositions on the state ballot. One is a bond measure, one is a constitutional amendment, one is a referendum, and the others are initiative statutes. All of them need a simple majority to pass.
Well, first up, we have Proposition 1, the water bond. Now, this one has been on and off the ballot several times. What does it look like now that we finally get a chance to vote on it?
The analysts have been working overtime because Proposition 1 arrived very late. The biggest change is in the amount. At $7.12 billion in new bonds, this is small for a California water bond proposal. To give a very quick recap of bonds, a state or local government sells bonds in order to finance long-term projects. A bit like a mortgage, it's a way to spread the cost of a large purchase over many years. California currently spends about $5 billion each year of general fund money on paying off bond debt, with that amount projected to rise to over $7 billion in 2019-2020 as bonds that voters have already approved are sold. If Proposition 1 passes, about $360 million will be added to annual debt service payments. Now, the bonds in Proposition 1 are proposed for a variety of types of projects, all having to do with California's water supply. $4.2 billion is intended to support water supply projects themselves, including $2.7 billion to pay up to half the cost of new dams and groundwater storage. The aim is for the bond money to be directed to the public benefits of such projects: water quality, habitat restoration, recreation, or the like, while local governments and other entities would pay for the private benefits, that is, water to their customers. Now, just under $1.5 billion of the bond money would be directed to watershed protection and restoration, $1.4 billion to improvements in water quality, and $395 million to flood protection, including the Delta levees. No money could be spent on tunnels or canals to route water around the Delta.
And who decides which projects will be funded?
An existing state agency, the California Water Commission, will choose the water storage projects to be funded. The other projects would be funded through the usual budget process, in which the legislature funds state agencies and they evaluate projects and decide which ones to fund. Of the $7.5 billion covered by this proposal, that's $7.1 billion of new bonds and $425 million of unused bonds from previous water bond acts. $5.7 billion of it can only be spent if the recipients provide matching funds, usually 50% of the project cost. That's the water supply and water quality parts of the bonds. The watershed and flood protection portions don't require matching funds. Who do we see talking about Proposition 1, and what do they have to say?
Well, the legislature put this measure on the ballot. Remember, they can't authorize bonds. Only the voters can do that. So signing arguments in favor, we see Governor Brown, the Farm Bureau Federation, and the Nature Conservancy. They say that Proposition 1 is a no-frills investment in critical projects. It secures our water future, keeps our farms productive, and puts Californians to work. It safeguards existing water supplies and protects the environment, and contains strict accountability requirements.
What about the opponents?
Well, the arguments against are signed by Assemblymember Wesley Chesbro from the North Coast, who's the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, by Food and Water Watch, and by Restore the Delta. They say that Proposition 1 wrongly focuses on building more dams. New dams won't produce more water, and they'll cost billions to build. Why should the general fund pay for dams that will benefit private water users? And they add that Proposition 1 doesn't adequately promote regional water self-sufficiency or reduce dependence on the water-deprived Delta ecosystem. And while we're talking about money, Proposition 2 is about the Budget Stabilization Account, or BSA. The BSA has existed since 2004. What difference will Proposition 2 make?
Proposition 2 would change the rules about how much money goes into the account and when money can be taken out. Basically, the BSA is our rainy day fund. In theory, the state puts money into the BSA when the economy is strong and then has savings available when trouble comes. California is adding to the BSA this year, but prior to that, it was actually completely empty for several years as a result of that recession that began in 2007. The current arrangement calls for the state to put 3% of the general fund, or about $3 billion, into the BSA each year, although the governor can reduce or eliminate this amount. The target size for the BSA is $8 billion, and funds can be released from the BSA by a vote of the legislature. Now, if Proposition 2 passes, the minimum amount to put in the BSA will go from 3% to 0.75% of the general fund, plus some capital gains tax revenues when those are high. In dollars, the amount paid in could range from $800 million to $2 billion or more. An equal amount would also have to be paid toward the state's long-term debts to local governments or health or pension funds each year for 15 years, after which those debt reduction payments could continue or go into the BSA instead. But although that minimum amount is lower, it would be harder to avoid putting money in. The state could only reduce payments if the governor declared a budget emergency and the legislature agreed. Withdrawing funds from the BSA would also require a budget emergency. The amount taken out could only be enough to cover the budget emergency or half the BSA, whichever is smaller, in the first year of an emergency. The new target size for the BSA would be 10% of the general fund, which would currently make it $11 billion. When the BSA is full, money that would be required to go to the BSA could instead be spent on infrastructure.
What is it that we're hearing about schools in Proposition 2?
Under certain conditions, when revenues are high, money would go into a new state reserve fund for schools and community colleges. This wouldn't change the amount of money the state spends on education, but it would smooth it out from year to year. And in the year after any money goes into the Education Reserve Fund, school district local reserves would be restricted to between 3 and 10% of their annual budget, depending on their size. State education officials could exempt school districts from this requirement if the districts face extraordinary fiscal circumstances. This part of the law, the cap on local school district reserves, would not be in the Constitution and could be changed in the future by a vote of the legislature. What do people say about Proposition 2?
Well, the legislature put Proposition 2 on the ballot. After all, they can't change the Constitution. Only the voters can do that. Supporters include Governor Brown, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the State Board of Education. They say that Proposition 2 will stabilize the state's budget by ensuring temporary revenues are set aside and not committed to ongoing spending, that it will accelerate the debt's debt payments, and create an education fund to avoid future cuts to schools. Now, the opposition arguments are signed by the Educate Our State, a San Francisco-based parents group. They say that Proposition 2 will allow the state to continue paying school districts late and even move money from education into the general fund, and that the cap on school district reserves means school districts will be less able to compensate for late payments from the state. Next up, health care insurance. What do we know about Proposition 45?
Healthcare plans in California are regulated by two different state agencies, either the Department of Insurance, headed by the Insurance Commissioner, or the Department of Managed Health Care, headed by a director appointed by the governor. Most Californians are covered by large group employee or government programs, but about 16% are covered by individual or small group employee plans, and these are the plans affected by Proposition 45. Right now, rate changes for the plans are reviewed by the regulating agency, but the agency can't veto rate changes. The Insurance Commissioner does have approval authority for auto and homeowner insurance rates. If Proposition 45 passes, the Insurance Commissioner will have the right to approve or reject rate changes for individual and small group health plans using that same process that currently governs auto and homeowner insurance. There may be public hearings, and results can be challenged in court by consumers or by insurance companies. In addition, Proposition 45 would make it illegal to use credit history or prior insurance coverage as a factor in determining rates or eligibility. What do we hear people saying about 45?
Well, Proposition 45 supporters include the California Nurses Association, Consumer Watchdog, and the Congress of California Seniors. The supporters say health insurance premiums have risen 5 times the rate of inflation since 2002. Californians have faced $250 million in rate hikes that regulators found to be unreasonable but could not stop. Proposition 45 extends the protections of Prop 103, which has saved consumers billions on home and auto insurance. The opponents include the American Nurses Association of California, Latino Physicians of California, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the California Association of Rural Health Clinics. The opponents say Prop 45 gives one politician too much power, even over what benefits and treatment options your insurance covers. Prop 45 creates duplicative, costly bureaucracy, and the sponsors are lawyers who stand to make millions off costly health care lawsuits. Covered California has just come out in opposition as well, saying that delays in approving rates could make it harder for people to sign up on the exchange, though the insurance commissioner disputes this. Staying with healthcare topic, we find Proposition 46 on medical malpractice lawsuits, drug testing of doctors, and prescription drug records.
Yes, Proposition 46 is another multi-part initiative. It addresses medical negligence lawsuits, prescription drug records, and physician drug testing. In 1975, California enacted MICRA, that's the Medical Injury Compensation Reform Act. Since then, although a lawsuit for medical negligence can claim any amount of actual economic damages, like lost wages and medical bills, there's been a limit of $250,000 on non-economic damages, often known as pain and suffering. The percentage of an award that can go to attorneys has also been capped. In Part 1, Proposition 46 would raise the limit on non-economic losses to $1.1 million, which is what $250,1975 would be worth today, and it would index that limit to inflation in the future. As far as Part 2 goes, California has a prescription drug database called Cures that's intended to track prescriptions of drugs subject to abuse and help prevent a patient from going to multiple doctors to obtain large quantities of these drugs. That database isn't yet ready to handle all the traffic if all doctors start checking it regularly. But under current law, doctors have until 2016 to register to use Cures, and even then won't be required to use it. Proposition 46 would require all doctors to check Cures every time before prescribing easily abused drugs. And in the third part, California currently doesn't require drug testing of doctors. If Proposition 46 passes, hospitals would be required to check doctors for drugs and alcohol at the doctor's expense, randomly, and also whenever one of their patients has an adverse event within 24 hours of the doctor's care or treatment, or when there's a report of possible drug or alcohol use while on duty. Doctors would also be required to report other doctors if they know anything that leads them to believe another doctor was impaired by drugs or alcohol while on duty or didn't follow the appropriate standard of care. So who's supporting and opposing this one?
Well, signers of supporting arguments for Proposition 46 include Consumer Watchdog, the Congress of California Seniors, and several bereaved families. They say Prop 46 will deter negligence by holding doctors accountable for errors. It will save lives by cracking down on prescription drug abuse, and it will protect patients from impaired doctors. The signers against include American Nurses Association California, Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, the California Small Business Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, California, among others. They say Prop 46 will cost taxpayers millions of dollars in order to increase trial lawyer profits and may drive medical professionals out of business. It threatens privacy with a huge online database that is vulnerable to hacking and won't even be ready until mid-2015. For a complete change of pace, Proposition 47 is on criminal sentences. What happens if 47 passes?
Proposition 47 addresses nonviolent felonies and those crimes known as wobblers that can be charged as either a misdemeanor or a felony. It would reduce most nonviolent felonies and wobblers to misdemeanors unless the defendant has prior convictions for serious or violent crimes like rape, murder, or child molestation. Specifically, the changes would affect drug possession, petty theft, receiving stolen property, and writing bad checks if the amount is under about $1,000. People who've already been convicted of felonies for these offenses would be resentenced unless the court finds a public safety risk. Savings would go to a newly created state fund for dropout prevention, victims services, and mental health and drug treatment services. What do people say about 47?
Well, in support, we see George Gaskin, the district attorney for the city and county of San Francisco, William Lansdowne, a former chief of police of San Jose and San Diego, and victims advocate Dion Wilson. They say Proposition 47 will improve public safety by prioritizing serious and violent crime. It will keep dangerous criminals locked up while saving hundreds of millions of dollars to fund schools and crime prevention. In opposition, the California Police Chiefs Association, California District Attorneys Association, Crime Victims United, and the California State Sheriff's Association say that Prop 47 will require the release of thousands of dangerous inmates. It will undermine laws against sex crimes, and it will overcrowd jails with dangerous felons who should be in prison. And finally, Proposition 48 is our referendum, and it's on Indian gaming compacts. First, what's different about a referendum?
A referendum doesn't make a new law. A referendum is used when a law has already been passed and the voters approve or reject it.
So how does Proposition 48 affect gaming compacts in California?
The legislature has negotiated compacts with the North Fork and Wyout tribes. The arrangement allows the North Fork Rancheria to build a casino on land about 38 miles from their reservation, land that was placed in federal trust for the tribe in 2012. Ordinarily, casinos can't be built on land acquired by a tribe after 1988, but exceptions can be made if the government agrees that it would be in the best interests of the tribe and not harmful to the surrounding community, which the federal and state governments determined to be true for the proposed North Fork location. In this case, both the North Fork Reservation and the Wyout lands are in more remote areas, while the recently acquired land is near a freeway and other casinos. The compacts also forbid gaming on Wyout tribal land in Humboldt County, but allow the Wyout tribe to receive a share of revenue from the proposed North Fork casino. The North Fork tribe would also need to make payments to two state government funds: the Revenue Sharing Trust Fund, which distributes money to tribes that don't run large casinos, and the Special Distribution Fund, which pays toward increased state and local government cost as a result of the casino, as well as programs to address gambling problems. So a yes vote allows the compacts to go forward, and a no vote vetoes them. Who supports and opposes 48?
Well, signing in favor, Governor Brown, the California State Building and Construction Trades Council, and the Board of Supervisors of Madera County. They say these compacts will create thousands of jobs, generate business opportunities in high unemployment areas, share revenues with state and local governments, promote tribal self-sufficiency, and avoid development in environmentally sensitive regions. In opposition, we mainly see groups opposed to off-reservation casinos and casinos near the proposed development. Arguments were signed by individual county supervisors from Fresno and Madera County, plus a neighboring tribe. The opponents say these compacts break the promise that casinos would only be located on the tribe's original reservation land and will start an avalanche of off-reservation casino projects. They do not provide money for schools or the general fund and won't create new jobs and only take resources and jobs from nearby casinos and businesses.
That's it for statewide measures this time around. What else do voters need to know?
Well, we'd like you to know that the League of Women Voters has speakers like us available before every statewide election. We make presentations on ballot measures throughout the community at libraries, churches, neighborhood associations, corporations, and other organizations. If you would like to schedule a presentation for your group, go to the League of Women Voters of California website at ca.lwv.org and click on Find a Local League on the left-hand side. Your local League of Women Voters will be happy to arrange for a speaker for your group. We will be continuing to make presentations up to Election Day, November 4th.
I'd also like to remind the viewers about the League of Women Voters nonpartisan election information website. You can learn about everything on your ballot by visiting www.smartvoter.org and typing in your address. Smart Voter has videos on the propositions, statements from candidates, and links to many other sources of information. Candidates have far more room on Smart Voter than in the ballot pamphlet to tell you their plans and priorities, and many of them do take advantage of the opportunity. Smart Voter also offers links to campaign finance reporting sites and other items of interest. You can even find your polling place. Other good places to look for election materials: the Easy Voter Guide, found in libraries and community centers and at www.easyvoterguide.org. The Easy Voter Guide comes in 5 languages, and all of them are available to download. VotersEdge.org offers records of who's giving how much money to which propositions, as well as which organizations and individuals have gone on record in support or opposition. Sometimes the supporters and opponents on record are not the same people pouring money into the campaign. So having the financial information side by side with the endorsements can be very interesting. The Legislative Analyst's Office website at lao.ca.gov offers information on many aspects of California government, as well as its finances. The Secretary of State's site at sos.ca.gov offers online voter registration, along with a lot of election information for current and past elections. This is also where you can look to see what propositions might turn up in future elections. The League of Women Voters Education Fund site, cavotes.org, has a host of useful links about registration, voting, and ballot measures. And finally, your local Registrar of Voters site has everything you ever wanted to know about local measures and voting in your area. But however you decide, please look at your voting choices. Spend a little time understanding them and vote your principles. We're writing laws here, laws that we'll be living under, and it's a job worth doing right. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to The Better Part for making this program possible.